To understand why the lower legs of older adults undergo such a dramatic visual and functional transformation, we must first look beyond the surface of the skin and into the microscopic architecture of the musculoskeletal system. The phenomenon of shrinking calves is not merely a cosmetic issue or an inevitable consequence of aging that one must passively accept. Rather, it is the visible manifestation of a complex biological process known as sarcopenia, specifically targeting the appendicular skeletal muscle. While muscle loss occurs throughout the body as we age, the calves, specifically the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles, are often the first to reveal this decline due to their unique physiological composition and their critical role in the human kinetic chain. The process begins subtly, often as early as the fourth decade of life, but accelerates precipitously after the age of 60, driven by a fundamental change in how our nervous system communicates with our muscle fibers. At the heart of this reduction in calf size is the phenomenon of motor unit remodeling. A motor unit consists of a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it innervates. In a healthy young adult, there is a robust connection between the spinal cord and the muscles of the lower leg, ensuring that when the brain signals for movement, the muscles respond with vigor. However, as we age, there is a progressive loss of alpha motor neurons in the spinal cord. When these neurons die, the muscle fibers they once controlled are left orphaned and disconnected from the nervous system. Without a neural signal, these fibers effectively undergo a programmed cell death or apoptosis and atrophy, while the body has a compensatory mechanism where surviving neurons send out new branches to rescue these orphaned fibers, a process called reinnervation. This rescue effort is imperfect. The surviving neurons are typically slow-twitch motor units, which means that even if the muscle fiber is saved, it is converted from a powerful, large, fast-twitch fiber into a smaller, slower-twitch fiber. This is crucial because the shape and bulk of the calf are largely provided by type 2 fast-twitch fibers. As these specific fibers atrophy or are converted to smaller type 1 fibers, the overall circumference of the calf diminishes, leading to the characteristic spindly appearance observed in the elderly. Furthermore, this neurological decline is compounded by a cellular crisis known as mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria are the power plants of the muscle cells, responsible for generating the energy required for contraction and maintenance. In the aging calf muscle, these mitochondria become less efficient and more prone to releasing reactive oxygen species, which creates a state of oxidative stress within the muscle tissue. This oxidative stress triggers inflammatory pathways that actively break down muscle protein. It creates a catabolic environment where the breakdown of muscle tissue exceeds the creation of new tissue. This is particularly devastating in the calf muscles because they are structurally unique. They're the farthest muscle group from the heart, operating against gravity to pump venous blood back up to the upper body. When the structural integrity of the muscle cells is compromised by mitochondrial failure and oxidative stress, the muscle pump mechanism weakens. This not only contributes to the physical shrinking of the muscle belly, but also impairs the delivery of nutrients and oxygen to the remaining tissue, creating a feedback loop of starvation and atrophy. We must also consider the hormonal shifts that dictate muscle size. The calf muscles are highly sensitive to anabolic hormones, particularly testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1. In youth, these hormones constantly stimulate the satellite cells, the stem cells of the muscle, to repair and build tissue. As we enter our senior years, the circulating levels of these hormones drop significantly. This hormonal drought creates a blunting effect on the muscle's ability to repair itself after daily microtrauma. Consequently, the daily wear and tear that would strengthen a young person's calf simply degrades the older adult's calf, as the chemical signals required to trigger regeneration are too faint to be heard by the cellular machinery. This physiological silence, combined with the loss of fast-twitch fibers and neural connectivity, results in the hollowed, flattened aesthetic of the aging lower leg, signaling a profound loss of functional reserve that extends far beyond mere appearance. Building upon the neurological and hormonal degradation outlined in the previous section, the narrative of shrinking calves deepens when we examine the metabolic alterations that occur within the aging body, specifically a condition known as anabolic resistance. This is perhaps the most insidious factor because it renders standard nutritional habits ineffective. In a younger body, the ingestion of protein triggers a robust synthesis of new muscle tissue. The amino acids act as a direct signal to build. However, in the elderly, the muscle tissue in the calves becomes resistant to these signals. It takes a significantly higher dose of protein and amino acids to trigger the same muscle-building response that was easily achieved in youth. Because many older adults actually reduce their protein intake due to changes in appetite, digestion, or dentition, they inadvertently starve their muscles. The calves, which require constant maintenance due to their constant use and locomotion, are hit hardest by this nutritional deficit. They are in a constant state of negative nitrogen balance, essentially eating themselves to provide amino acids for other vital organs, leading to rapid reductions in muscle mass and circumference. This metabolic resistance interacts dangerously with the disuse atrophy cycle, often misidentified as simple aging. It is a common misconception that walking is sufficient exercise to maintain calf size. While walking is excellent for cardiovascular health, it represents a low-intensity stimulus that primarily engages type 1 slow-twitch fibers, the fibers that are most resistant to atrophy. It does almost nothing to stimulate the type 2 fibers that provide muscle volume. As older adults transition into more sedentary lifestyles or limit their activity to low-intensity walking, the high-threshold motor units responsible for the bulk of the calf muscle are never activated. The body follows a strict use-it-or-lose-it economic policy. If the large, energy-expensive muscle fibers of the gastrocnemius are not challenged by resistance or speed, the body dismantles them to conserve energy. This is why we see the phenomenon where an active older walker may still have very thin legs. The stimulus is insufficient to overcome the age-related anabolic resistance and neural loss. The mechanical tension provided by daily walking falls below the threshold required to initiate muscle protein synthesis in an aged muscle, resulting in a continuous, slow decline in mass. Moreover, we must address the vascular component of this deterioration, specifically the impact of peripheral arterial health on muscle volume. The vascular system is the supply line for muscle preservation. As arteries stiffen and microscopic capillaries diminish in density, a condition known as capillary rarefaction, the blood flow to the lower extremities is compromised. This reduction in perfusion means that even if an older adult consumes enough protein and hormones are present, the delivery system is flawed. The calf muscles are frequently in a state of mild hypoxia, low oxygen, and nutrient deprivation. This is exacerbated by conditions like peripheral artery disease, PAD, which is common in the elderly but often undiagnosed. When blood flow is restricted, the muscle tissue is replaced by adipose, fat, tissue, and fibrotic scar tissue. This marbling of the muscle makes the calf look softer and less defined, and eventually, as the fat infiltration stabilizes, the overall bulk decreases because fat takes up volume but does not support the structural architecture of the leg like muscle does. The result is a limb that is not only smaller but functionally brittle, lacking the contractile quality to generate force. The consequences of this metabolic and lifestyle convergence are severe. The shrinking of the calf is a direct predictor of fall risk and mortality. The calf muscles act as the primary stabilizers of the ankle joint and are responsible for the toe-off phase of walking. As these muscles atrophy, the older adult loses the ability to correct their balance when they stumble. The proprioceptors, sensory receptors within the muscle that tell the brain where the foot is in space, decline in number along with the muscle fibers. This leads to a gait that is shuffling and tentative. The metabolic engine of the leg slows down, reducing the body's ability to dispose of glucose, which in turn increases the risk of type 2 diabetes, further damaging the nerves and blood vessels in the legs. Thus, the shrinking calf is not an isolated symptom, but a central gear in a vicious cycle of frailty, metabolic disease, and loss of independence, driven by a mismatch between the aging body's increased needs and the decreased stimulation it receives from a modern, comfort-oriented lifestyle. Despite the bleak progression of biological decay and metabolic resistance, the narrative of the aging calf muscle is not one of inevitable defeat. Rather, the plasticity of the musculoskeletal system remains surprisingly robust well into the 9th decade of life, provided the correct stimuli are applied. Reversing the atrophy of the calves requires a paradigm shift from maintenance to aggressive rehabilitation, utilizing specific scientific principles that override the body's tendency to break down tissue. The cornerstone of this reversal is the application of high-intensity mechanical loading to bypass anabolic resistance. We now know that while the threshold to trigger muscle growth is higher in the elderly, it is not unreachable. The solution lies in resistance training that specifically targets the type 2 fibers. This means moving beyond simple walking and engaging in loaded heel raises and eccentric movements. The eccentric phase, the lowering part of movement, is particularly potent for the elderly because it generates high levels of mechanical tension with a lower metabolic cost, causing micro-damage that stimulates the release of local growth factors and forces the remodeling of the muscle architecture. To effectively rebuild the calf, the training protocol must focus on both the soleus and the gastrocnemius muscles with different approaches. The soleus, which sits underneath, requires endurance-based loading, while the superficial gastrocnemius requires heavier, explosive loads to re-engage those dormant fast-twitch fibers. A critical strategy is the concept of power training, performing the lifting phase of a heel raise quickly and the lowering phase slowly. This rapid firing recruits the high-threshold motor units that have been disconnected due to neural decline. This type of training exploits neuroplasticity. It forces the nervous system to re-establish strong connections with the muscle fibers, effectively waking up the tissue. Furthermore, this mechanical stress acts as a pump, physically forcing blood into the stiffened capillaries, promoting angiogenesis, the creation of new blood vessels, which restores the nutrient supply lines that were lost to aging. However, mechanical stress is only half the equation. The chemical environment must be optimized to support this growth, requiring a precise nutritional intervention. To overcome anabolic resistance, the elderly must consume protein in distinct, concentrated pulses rather than spreading small amounts throughout the day. The critical trigger is the amino acid leucine. Research suggests that older muscles require a leucine threshold of approximately 3 to 4 grams per meal to switch on the machinery of muscle protein synthesis. This usually equates to 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein in a single sitting. Supplements such as creatine monohydrate also play a vital role here. Often viewed as a supplement for bodybuilders, creatine is essentially a fuel source for type 2 fibers and has been shown to improve hydration status within the muscle cell, protecting it from damage and allowing for more intense training sessions. Additionally, correcting vitamin D deficiencies is non-negotiable, as vitamin D receptors on muscle cells are essential for strength and size, and deficiency is rampant in the older population. Finally, the restoration of the calf muscles requires a holistic management of inflammation and recovery. Chronic low-grade inflammation, often called inflammaging, acts as a constant brake on muscle growth. Anti-inflammatory strategies, including a diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids and the management of sleep quality, reduce the catabolic signals that destroy muscle. The recovery of the calf is also dependent on vascular therapy. Simple interventions like compression therapy during rest, elevation, and hydration ensure that the metabolites from exercise are cleared and nutrients are delivered. When these 3 pillars, high-threshold mechanical loading, leucine-rich nutritional pulsing, and vascular/inflammatory management, are executed simultaneously, the results can be profound. We see not just a halt in atrophy, but a measurable increase in muscle cross-sectional area and density. The teardrop shape of the muscle can return, and more importantly, the functional capacity of the senior increases, restoring confidence, balance, and the vital freedom of movement. The shrinking calf is a warning sign, but it is one that can be answered with a powerful, scientifically grounded biological rebuttal.